Good morning and welcome to my blog, Wisdom for Today. And I pray this beautiful day finds you well and trusting God in whatever you're going through, whatever joys or sorrows. Today, I want to speak to you about Christ being our solid rock. You know, when I was a little girl, we sang a song in Sunday school that I still remember. It goes like this: I go to the rock of my salvation. I go to the stone that the builders rejected. I go to the mountain, and the mountain stands by me. When all around is shifting sand, on Christ the solid rock I stand. When I need a helper, when I need a friend, I go to the rock. I love that hymn. And there's a reason that God is often referred to as a rock or as sturdy as a mountain. Both the covenants in the Old Testament that God made with his children, the Levitical covenant that God made with Moses, and the Abrahamic covenant that God made with Abraham, took place on mountains. And that is significant in that God is as solid as a mountain. And that phrase is used again and again. A mountain cannot be moved unless it's by extreme faith. Faith as much as a mustard seed, Jesus said, but normally mountains are so strong that they can't be moved. And another reason we use the term rock for God is that David used it. And many of our hymns and songs are modeled after the Psalms in the Bible. Over 20 times in the book of Psalms, David uses the term rock for God. He often says, my rock and my fortress, my rock and my salvation. He'll pair it, or my rock and my shield. And there's a reason for that. Remember, David was a warrior. And one of the reasons he couldn't build the temple to God is that there was blood on his hand. He was known as a man who shed blood. And so he was not allowed to build the temple. But as a warrior, he was accustomed to using rocks. First, to see the enemy, he would stand upon it to look out on the battlefield. But secondly, as a shield, you would hide behind a rock. Or you would hide behind a rock that was next to a cave. That's why you'd say, my rock and my fortress. The second reason that David would use the word rock is, remember, David was a shepherd boy. And remember, he had a slingshot. And he used that slingshot not only to slay Goliath, but the other enemies who sought to get his sheep. The passage I want to read to you is from Psalms 19, where he says, my rock and my redeemer. And I want you to remember that a redeemer was a term that was used for slavery. If someone had taken you captive as a slave, when someone bought you back from that captivity, they were your redeemer. And David's confessing a sin in this passage. Keep your servant from willful sins, he says. May they not rule over me. Then I will be blameless, innocent of great transgression. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be pleasing to thy sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. In this passage, David is asking God to save him from himself. Yes, David had very real enemies. Some that were innocent, that he was innocent of having. Saul was jealous of him, and he considered Saul his friend whom he shared his bread with, and suddenly he was his great enemy. His son Absalom rose up against him to take his power. David did not make those enemies. Those enemies were built out of jealousy and the politics of being in the king's court. And he had enemies of neighboring nations, but he also had enemies of his own making as well, because he was aggressive and because he sinned with Bathsheba's husband, which was one of the reasons he couldn't build the temple. Sometimes we're our own worst enemy. But in either case, God can be our rock. He's the thing, although we will change, although people around us will change as much as shifting sand, God will not change, and he can be our rock. You know, when I first got out of the hospital with my car accident in 1993, about a month into my recovery, I wanted to go to the beach. And I had a walker at that time. I could not walk with just a cane. And I remember looking so excitingly at the water, wanting to put my feet in the water. And I had some very loving, patient Christian friends who walked me into the beach. And the more I walked, the deeper I got in the sand. And then we realized we weren't going to make it to the beach. And they wanted to carry me back to the sidewalk, but I didn't want to go. It was Coronado Beach, which is a little island right off of San Diego. And I turned around and there was these big rocks that I knew was by the path to the sidewalk. And I focused on those rocks to get out of that sand onto those rocks, because the sand was shifting and changing, but I knew a rock would not. You may be thinking of another hymn. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other stones are shifting sand, all other ground is shifting sand. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly lean on Jesus' name. Edmund Moore wrote that hymn. He'd written the chorus the night before. He was a poet, so writing came natural to him. But he met his pastor the next day walking to work, and the pastor said that a woman was dying, and he was going quick to her bedside. And usually he sang a hymn by the bedside, and there was no hymnal there. So Edmund Moore took out his little piece of paper, which he had jotted down a few notes, and the pastor and him sang that song, that on Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is shifting sand. People will change, and sometimes they'll betray you. Circumstances will change, and sometimes you'll feel betrayed by that. Sometimes our own body changes, and we feel betrayed that we're not as strong or as powerful as we used to be. But brothers and sisters, God will never change. I pray that you'll find that rock and stand on it. I look forward to seeing you, and I pray that many of you will come to church this Sunday. God's blessings, and have a great day.